Okay, we are going to start the online meeting. Hello everyone. Welcome to the online meeting of JCER. Japan Center for Economic Research and Nikkei conduct a consensus survey on Asian economies every 3 months. And the result of the June survey has just released. Today, we invited 3 distinguished guests from Asian countries to this online meeting. We are going to have discussions on the Asian economies under the corona crisis. So I introduce 3 guests following the alphabetical order of the countries. I first introduce Dr. Tirukanta Patnaik from India. He is Chief Economist of the National Stock Exchange of India. Hello, Dr. Patnaik, and thank you very much for joining our conference.
Arigato, Osaka-san. Thank you so much.
So next, I introduce Mr. Carlos Asuncion from the Philippines. He is Chief Economist of Union Bank of the Philippines. Welcome to this online meeting, Mr. Asuncion.
Thank you. Thank you.
And from Singapore, we invited Mr. Manbhaskaran. He is Chief Executive Officer of Centennial Asia Advisors. Hello, Mr. Bhaskaran. Very nice to meet you.
Very much. Thank you.
Okay, so before starting the discussion, I'd like to make a few comments on our June survey. There are 3 important points I should tell you. The first point is the current situation of the economies as well as the coronavirus outbreak. The Asian economies have worsened drastically in the last 3 months. In the second quarter, from April to June, it is estimated that the economies shrunk by more than 20% in India and around 10% in the Philippines and Singapore. The annual projections are also negative in major Asian countries. The decrease of the economy are, of course, because of the coronavirus pandemic. The impact of lockdown and other restriction measures were very huge on the economies. The second point is the future prospect. Many economists in this survey expected their economies to recover after the second half of this year. And growth rates are expected to return to positive next year. But the scenario is possible only when the future spread of coronavirus infection is well managed. The economists also focus on the policies to determine the future development of the economies. And the third point is changes following the corona shock. Yeah, many economists expected that digitalization will accelerate, both in business and our daily lives. But that is not all. Many other changes shown here. The changes include the increased employment, the more realignment of business and industries, and so on. So these are the main points of our survey in June. And so today we are going to discuss following to the order of these 3 points. Okay, first we will discuss the current situation of the economies and coronavirus pandemic. So I want to talk about India first. There are many news reported from India to the world, including Japan, the nationwide lockdown, and millions of people went back from cities to the villages, and economic activities were strictly restricted in the last several months. Still, the coronavirus infection is increasing. So, Dr. Patnaik, could you explain the current situation in India in both the economies and the corona pandemic? In other words, we'd like to know what's going on in India right now. So, please explain in 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Kusaka-san. Is it possible to have my presentation there?
Yeah, please. Just a minute, I will cut it.
Thank you.
Okay, so you can use the share command.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Is it visible now?
We can see, yeah.
Thank you. So, usually, I must say thanks again, Kusaka-san, for inviting me to the JCER.
It's my pleasure.
It is the right time, about 3 months later, to take a sense of what is happening with the coronavirus crisis. The perspectives have changed over the last 3 months, and it makes sense for us to take stock of the situation today. My presentation today has about 36 slides, but given you have very astutely divided the entire presentation into 3 parts, let me try and quickly give a sense of what is happening with the macro, and I will jump from slide to slide. Hope that's okay, in order to not take too much time of the audience. So a very quick part here is the status of coronavirus crisis continues to remain quite severe across the world. We have over 11 million cases at the moment. We are adding about 100,000 cases a day, and the spread of the virus has shifted earlier from China to Europe, and now the large countries are India, Brazil, United States has remained constant over the last several months. I will skip there. I will not I'll not spend too much time there. Where does India stand? So India at the moment is the third most affected country in the world with coronavirus cases. The numbers on my presentation in figure 4 show a figure of around 700,000, 697. As I speak today, the number has increased by another 25,000. So we have crossed 700,000 cases. And the interesting trend is something that I would like to quickly highlight on figure 5, which is that this essentially shows how quickly are cases likely to double at the current rate. So you can notice here that India has a current doubling rate of about 20 days. So in other words, the current 700,000 people that are affected in India are likely to become 1.5 million in the next 20 days. This is a seriously worrisome situation. While the United States and Brazil have higher numbers, but their rate of growth is much slower than India's. So we believe that at this rate, India will become the country with the highest number of cases globally in the next 1.5, maybe 2 months. At least by the end of July, India will at this rate cross Brazil, and maybe in the next another 2 months or so, we might cross US. So the only the silver lining in that sense is to look at how many deaths have taken place due to corona crisis, coronavirus outbreak, rather than just look at the affected people, and also to look at how many people are actually affected today. So some of the good things here are on the next slide, on slide 5. As you can see, the positivity rate in India is again quite low. So out of 100 tests, about 7 tests come as positive, and this is much lower than some of the other cases that you can see on figure 7. Further, because of its very wide population, The cases per million people is also quite low in India, even though the number is quite high. The absolute number is quite high. And as figure 9 tells you, the deaths is quite a low number. It's only about 15 per million population compared to the numbers that you can see here. For UK, Spain, the numbers are much higher at this point. For instance, Brazil has about 300 people falling through the crisis, coronavirus outbreak per million people, and India is about 15. So those are some of the positive linings. But the key problem, however, is this: the economic implications. Actually, I'll be very quick here. Rather than go into the long slides, let me just quickly explain. The crisis is something unlikely that we have seen earlier. I will skip these slides because this is very well known to the entire audience. That we have a global recession. IMF is expecting numbers to be quite negative. I will also skip from this. Just an important point here: IMF now expects India's growth to be about 4.5% negative for 2020. For the JCER survey, the number is about 5% negative, and for this year. And remember, this number was 5% positive in the previous survey. So you can imagine how quickly the numbers have been revised downwards. And the number for the next year is around 7% for in the JCER survey. So one question that I would like to answer, Kusaka-san, that you have asked: are we looking at a V-shaped recovery? So purely in terms of numbers, you will see a much better number for 2021 than 2020. So as as you can see on figure 18 here, the global growth for this year is expected to be -5%. Next year expected to be around 5.4%. For India, IMF expects growth to come back to 6%. The JCER survey gives it around 7%. We also expect somewhat similar numbers for us. So yes, the numbers will be quite high for FY21, or rather the year 2021. And I will swift quickly along these. As you ask questions, maybe I'll come down to the slides again. So let me stop here. Hope I have not taken up more than 7 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. And let me make one question, confirmation on the current situation. You kindly provided good data and information on economic development as well as the coronavirus development. And my question is the social situation. Because we see the video or the report that the millions of people returning back from cities to the villages in a very crowded trains and buses. And I wonder if there is some kind of social, instability or some kind of, troubles in some part of the Indian society. Okay. How do you see on this?
Kusaka-san, to explain that, let me come quickly to a presentation, to a chart that I have made up, which might help explain the problem. So please see this. So if you see the figure here on unemployment, you can see how unemployment went up from slightly below 10% levels to more than 20% level as the lockdown started. The Indian economy saw a complete lockdown from March 25th, which essentially meant that millions of people, literally millions of people, were left out of work. So just to give you a number in terms of perspective, India has 1.3 billion people, out of which the workforce is around 500 million people. And out of these 500 million people, about 120 million people are migrant workers, 120 million of them. And when the economy saw a complete lockdown, large parts of these migrant workers were left without jobs. And unlike developed nations, Indian labor does not have the kind of protection in terms of insurance, in terms of provident funds that could help in terms when the situation becomes dire. So as you can see in my chart here, unemployment rate went up to nearly 23%, and that explains the scenes that we saw in India, where people were, literally hundreds of, millions upon millions of people were going back home. So just to give you another perspective, the eastern part of India is primarily a labor surplus economy, labor surplus area, and large parts of manufacturing are in the western sides. So people, when they stopped working, they actually went back to the rural areas. But the silver lining there, the good news there is, as you can see, from April, May, unemployment has come down again. It has come down to about 10% levels. The next chart, I show it across urban and rural areas. You can see how unemployment went up with the lockdown, and as the lockdown has opened, unemployment has come down in both rural and urban areas. And in terms of social unrest, no, there have been luckily not much social unrest thanks to the lockdown.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, we should understand that the unemployment will hold the key for the future development of both economy and social stability, and so we should pay attention to that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Patnaik. So now I'm going to move to the Philippines. Thank you very much for waiting, Mr. Asuncion. In the Philippines, the infection is still increasing, if I understand correctly. And the lockdown in Manila, introduced in the middle of March, it started to be eased in May. And still the GDP in the second quarter dropped very sharply. Unemployment rate has now already increased. And so, understanding these situations, I want to ask you to what's going on with Corona and the economies in the Philippines. Again, please now give your explanation in 7 minutes.
Yeah. Can I just share my
Yeah, you can share it now. Can you up it? Oh yeah.
my slide clear? Ready? Is it being shown? Ready?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me just go through the same as what the Dr. Patnaik has done. So currently, the local situation, as you mentioned, is well, I would say previous when it was when the economy was reopening, May or June, early, sort of the infections were not unlike the last 4 days or 5 days. There has been a spike in the last 5 days, about 1,500 plus, and the biggest one was, I think, 2,000 plus last Sunday. So and there are some groups that are saying that it may actually breach by 60,000. Today it's about 48,000 cases already. So even the University of the Philippines, a group that has been helping the government, is saying that if this situation will continue the way that it has been growing in the last 5 days, it can actually reach by 100,000 by the end of August. So I think this is the uptick of the infection is basically because of the reopening. When people start just moving, you can't help but be with each other. Even if you are social distancing and people are in a new situation, and or people sometimes can be lax, they don't really understand the situation, the gravity of the situation yet. So, it is somehow a unexpected situation. But but this is something that has to be looked into very carefully. And in this slide, there is what you call the shape of recovery exercise that we did in the bank. So pretty much our assumption was that by 2020, second quarter of 2020, there will be a vaccine that will be discovered. That's our assumption, just to have that base scenario, and then we move on from a best to a worst case scenario. But let me go to the outlook and jump to that particular slide. Oops. Yeah, I think I did mention about this in my in the survey that the Philippine economy is expected to be contracting by 6.8 2020. We were actually very reluctant to release it yet, but we noticed that there were some other groups, research groups, that were actually even deeper. And we know that it will be driven by personal consumption reduction, because basically the Philippines about 74% private consumption, and it will be driven by lower consumer confidence. We know that, and job losses, which is about in April 17.7%, and we'll have another round of survey by end of July. So yeah, and then we know that government spending and capital formation will increase to help mitigate the economic losses, but also this will be offset by your lower private investment due to, of course, lower investor confidence. And we do expect, based on our assumption, that there will be some sort of therapy, some sort of vaccine that will be discovered by the second quarter of 2021. That's why we have a V-shape. That's where our a V-shaped assumption is, basically. But when you break this down quarterly, it looks like more of a crazy W. But when you smoothen them out, it looks like a V with our base assumption. So yeah, but basically this is where our we think that the economy is going in the Philippines.
Okay, thank you very much. So let me again ask about the social situation at this moment. Yeah, after the easing of the lockdown, how is the atmosphere in the Manila and the Philippine cities?
Yeah, well, when the lockdown was initiated April and then May, and people were really feeling insecure, especially those in the of course, those people who are daily wage earners. Of course, there were problems with the what you call the social amelioration program. Basically, the handouts to people because of the difficulty of giving them out. In fact, local government units only registered about 15% of effectivity, so that's very low.
Oh,
so
yeah,
that I account that for just some institutional weakness. We could have rolled out immediately the national ID. It could have been a lot better, faster. I think government is also mindful of that, and they are actually fast tracking that. But in terms of the social situation, it's not. There's nothing concerning that I see so far. And I think that a government has some sort of handle of the situation. In fact, even in the southern city of Cebu, where particularly Cebu City, where the what you call the lockdown or the highest form of lockdown or the enhanced community quarantine, as we say here, has been recalled because of there's some infections that were rising again, and pretty much it's very well handled. It's very there's nothing concerning at this point.
I see. So in short, it is less free, but keeps stability.
Yeah. You can say that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. For your cooperation, because now you have now finished in 7 minutes. Great, thank you very much. So now it's time for Singapore, Mr. Bhaskaran. Thank you very much for waiting. And for you, Mr. Bhaskaran, I'd like to ask you to explain not only the situation in Singapore, but also in the neighboring countries. As I know, you are watching the regional development very well. So in some cities, countries, including Singapore, political situation is at a crucial time. And please tell us the latest development of the economies, as well as coronavirus pandemic and politics, please.
Thank you very much. And once again, Kosaka-san, thank you so much for involving us in this seminar. And hello, everyone. Let me summarize my view this way. I think the second quarter probably saw the trough, the worst of the economic impact from the pandemic. How the situation unfolds from here onwards would depend on a few factors. One is the trajectory of the virus. What we find is that countries like Vietnam, Brunei have really controlled the pandemic extremely well, and they have been able to ease their lockdowns very rapidly and go back to normal activity. Thailand and Malaysia have actually also done remarkably well and are opening up their economies quite aggressively, except of course to cross-border travel. Singapore is just a bit behind. We had the situation relatively well under control, but unfortunately we made a misjudgment in terms of the risk in the foreign workers, of which we have a very large population. And the crisis really got out of control for a while, but now it is coming down. And that has enabled us to substantially ease the lockdown as of late last month. So I think the virus is under control in Singapore and also some of our neighboring countries. That allows a return to normalization of economic. Second thing is what we notice is that where consumers feel confident that their governments have controlled the pandemic, there is considerable resilience in the consumer, and they come back fairly quickly in terms of their spending on what we call social consumption activities that involve face-to-face meetings. And that suggests that demand can come back as long as government actions on the public health sector are credible. Third factor is the extent of policy support, which has been very substantial in Malaysia and Singapore, and increasingly in Thailand as well. And I believe that the policy support will be expanded in the following weeks to come, and that should also help the direction of the economy. The fourth thing is how dependent the economies are on the activities that are most affected by the crisis, such as tourism and transportation activities and social consumption. And clearly Singapore, as a highly open economy, dependent on not just tourism, but also logistics, air transport, and so on, we will see one of the worst economic contractions in our history in the second quarter. Thailand will also be severely hurt because although it has brought the virus under control, it is extremely exposed to tourism. And unfortunately for Thailand, they also have other factors such as a drought, which has hurt their rural economy. So these are the four factors that characterize our current state. I still feel that this is the worst period. It is over, and we should start seeing an improvement generally from this month onwards. Let me stop here.
Okay, thank you very much. You kindly provided us a very, objective and explanation in detail. And I'm a little bit now relieved now with your explanation that the policies of the Singapore, Malaysia, and some other countries countries are well organized. And do you think any concerns in your mind which would change the positive scenario you mentioned? In other words, you said that the worst time is over right now, but how can we believe it? On which conditions we can?
Well, if the virus mutates and becomes dangerous again, then I think we are going to be in trouble. One of our basic assumptions is not so much about a vaccine, but the drug therapies that are coming on stream, such as remdesivir and so on, and the steroid-based treatments will improve, and the cocktail of drugs will reduce the morbidity and mortality rates in the virus. Now, that's a very important assumption we're making now. If that is not the case, then I think it becomes more pessimistic.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have discussed current situation and the economy, the coronavirus pandemic, as well as the social situation. So now we are going to move to the second round